Well, good morning. And I'm here with Leah Mermelstien. Leah is a well-known expert and author on the teaching of writing, reading, writing, and language development. Been a keynote speaker at national conventions, admired for her close study of student writing. She works closely with the school districts, and we'll hear about that during the interview, is helping to develop and deliver quality, cohesive literacy instruction. Uh, she has written numerous books, and she's going to be talking about one of those books today. She lives in Hoboken, New Jersey. Did I say that right? I hope.
You
Hoboken.
did, you did.
Okay, wonderful. With her 7-year-old daughter, and I see the daughters there on the
Yes, she's a little bit younger in those pictures, but she's now 8 actually.
Okay, so that's enough from Dr. Sam. It's time to turn things over. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, Sam, thanks so much for having me. You said a lot about me, but I'm gonna just share a little bit more about me, and I have to sneak in why I'm super excited to be talking to you today. So, like you said, Sam, I'm a literacy consultant. I work side by side with elementary schools. Really, my goal is to collaborate with schools to create positive and transformative change in schools. I'm really all about change. One of the things that's most important to me is being able to create simple tools for teachers for complex work. Because the work that we do is complex, but I want teachers to have simple tools so they can focus on kids. I'm also, like you said, an author, and I love I love writing side by side with being in schools because I feel like both jobs help each other. So when I write, because and we all know when we write, we linger longer on ideas. So it's in the writing sometimes where I'll figure out how to solve problems in schools. And being able to go to school, I go into like hundreds of schools each year, not this year, which I can't wait for next year, but going into schools, you know this, you work with so many kids, you go into schools and it gives you a real life sense of what's happening. I'm someone, and I know you are the same, I value both written research, what's out there to read, but I equally value classroom research. What we learn from watching teachers day in and day out is just as important. I think I've heard you talk about this. I think it's Tim Brzezinski who said it, that teaching is
Oh,
both an
yes, Tim.
art. Yes, Tim, it's both an art and science. And I believe that to the core of me, that it's bringing those two things together. So one of the reasons why I'm especially excited to talk to you is I've heard you talk for years about the importance of a reading evolution. And one of my hopes is that my book serves as a way for folks to have a conversation about a writing evolution. You know, I myself, in writing the book, went through a writing evolution. I had to have some tough conversations, both inwardly and with other people, about what was working in what I've been doing for 20 years, what maybe I hadn't done enough of that I needed to look at in more depth. And it's interesting because the words tough conversation, it's true they were tough conversations, but I never want to scare anyone away from having those tough conversations because after the initial toughness, the conversations were enlightening and transformative. And so I just hope other people can kind of join us in those tough but transformative conversations.
Okay, well, that certainly, first of all, thank you. Uh, and secondly, I would welcome a writing evolution as well. The two things are so intertwined, and I'm not going to steal your
Yeah.
thunder on that. But
Yes.
anyone that's practiced teaching in literacy for any length of time knows the importance of the ties between the two. So it's time now to tell us about your book. Tell us why you wrote the book, and um, let's move into that topic.
Wonderful. So I'm a problem solver by nature. My role in going into schools is to go into schools and help solve problems, things that are getting in the way of all students thriving. So this newest book is a result of two problems I saw in schools, and one was a student problem, and one was a teacher problem. And that with both of those problems, I wrote the book in an attempt to try and solve them, or at least bring some clarity to them. So the first one is a student problem. And what I was noticing is that not all students were becoming independent writers. So I would watch lots of wonderful teachers actually doing what I saw as really strong lessons. And they were the kinds of lessons that I used to do as a classroom teacher. I would these teachers would do a quick model. They would then do a quick guided practice, and then off the kids went for their applying that work to their writing. And for some children, and in some situations, that was perfect. Kids could, that model, that quick guided practice got them able to apply that. And for other kids and in other situations, it wasn't enough practice for them. And so therefore they were sent off and they weren't able to apply it. Therefore they weren't working independently. For other kids, they didn't even need that quick model. And so what I was seeing is that because some kids weren't becoming independent writers, I saw it as an equity issue. And people use those words all the time. And what I'm referring to here is equity in learning opportunities, that some kids were getting the learning opportunities that made them successful, and some kids weren't. So what I wanted to do in the book is lay out different kinds of learning opportunities that we can provide for kids when the learning opportunity we give them doesn't work. And my hope is by laying those out really clearly, teachers can see them and do them. So that was the student problem. The teacher problem, which I don't think will come as a surprise to you, is that I was noticing a growing feeling of teachers being overwhelmed. And I tried to kind of dig into what is this overwhelmness? And I began to see that teachers were getting a lot of what seemed like, which I don't think it is, but seemed like to them, information that was that contradicted one another. So they might go to a workshop and hear the importance of choice in writing. And then they would go to another workshop where they'd hear how it was really important for kids to write across the content areas and to write about what they were learning in school. And they'd kind of put their hands up and be like, well, what should I do? Or they might hear the importance of teaching the importance of vocabulary and grammar in writing. And then they'd hear about kids should be writing a lot. Or they might hear the importance of being a teacher who's responsive to kids in the moment more organically, and then the importance of systematic teaching. And so they were kind of throwing their hands up in the air saying, well, which one do I do? And so I tried to, when I talk about the We Do model, I tried to bring this together in the We Do model, really, and I know you believe this, that all of those help in different situations.
Okay, and that's well, first of all, welcome to the centrist movement. Wow.
Yeah.
What a strong voice in the movement you are. So how about you now, and by the way, knowing teachers, and I'm planning to work with some third grade teachers next year with writing workshop, and I'm just listening, kind of like, okay, I'm using this stuff. Can you share the major parts of this We Do writing model with us? And feel free to share screen if you need to.
Absolutely. I think I will share my screen so people can actually see the model, and it's a little sneak peek into the book, which will actually be out in a few short weeks. Okay, so here is just a kind of visual of the We Do model. And the whole book goes into this in great detail, but just for the purposes of our conversation, I'll just kind of give you kind of a summary of it. So the We Do model is the power of three. And what I want to say before I talk about it is that the We Do model isn't a curriculum. My hope is that if you already have a writing curriculum, it brings your curriculum to life. It makes it responsive to the kids in front of you. I really think that some teachers I work with use this to create their own writing curriculum, and others use this to help them choose a writing curriculum. But this is more of a guide, a simple guide that teachers can use for the complex act of teaching writing. So it really is steeped in the power of three. So the first threesome is the 3 strands of writing instruction. So what I tried to do is to say that there's really 3 types of instruction that we need to give our kids. And the first one is language conventions. And so language conventions is all about getting print on the page. So it's phonics, it's spelling, it's the convention, spacing, punctuation. So it's all about putting print on the page that others can read. And so the second one, the second strand is language composition. And that's all about vocabulary and grammar. Um, um, and when I talk about grammar, I'm talking about grammatically correct and grammatically complicated. And for me, the power in this is also the idea of kids saying it out loud. And so that we're trying to get kids to say more complicated sentences and vocabulary with the hopes that it will help them write it. So there's language conventions, language composition, and application. And application is really about helping kids bring those 2 things together, the conventions and the composition together as they take a piece through the writing process. And so for me, I feel like we can categorize anything that we're teaching in writing underneath those 3 instructional strands. So what I try to do next, the next threesome, are the corresponding types of writing sessions that you can put into your classroom to support those strands. So for example, language conventions, I can deliberately teach language conventions through interactive writing. And Sam, you know as well as I know that interactive writing is nothing new. I did not create interactive writing. That's been around since the 80s and 90s from Gay Sue Pinnell and Irene Fontes. In my book, I talk about kind of an updated way to think about interactive writing, not to take away from what I see as the more organic interactive writing, but as a way to imagine that another way to think about interactive writing is for kids to deliberately practice what they're learning during phonics instruction. And so again, short, deliberate interactive writing sessions, short, deliberate write aloud sessions, where write aloud would focus more on language composition. And so in write aloud, children are constructing and then practicing sentences that are more complicated in grammar, more complicated in vocabulary. And then finally, writing process sessions, which are deliberately having kids bring language conventions and language composition together as they go through an abbreviated writing process. And one of the things I kind of recommend to teachers in the book is that these are deliberate. And when I mean deliberate is I know when I'm doing interactive writing, I'm working on language conventions and language conventions only. And when I'm doing write aloud, I'm working on language composition. And I recommend keeping these short, 10 minutes, 15 minutes top, so that you're giving kids this deliberate practice, but there's still plenty of time for kids to be writing independently and doing other things. I also recommend often during these deliberate ones that kids are writing across the curriculum, that you're using this to write about what you're learning in school, but that they have plenty of time for their own choice topics. So I think it's super important to keep these short. And then within that, the last threesome is the power of 3 in really being responsive to your kids and making decisions on the level of support or practice that they need. So for example, I could do interactive writing as a shared experience. Typically, doesn't have to be, that means my whole class and the teacher is doing the teacher is writing and the students are helping. I could do interactive writing as a guided experience. Doesn't have to be small group, but now they're getting less support. The kids are doing it and the teacher is helping. Both of those tend to be shared topics, and then applied doesn't have to be one-on-one, but typically it is. And now the student is working on their own unique topic and the teacher is coaching. So really what this does is it gives you 9 types of shared writing, because I can do interactive writing as shared, guided, or applied, write aloud as shared, guided, or applied, or writing process. And in my book, I give concrete examples of all of that, both in upper grade and lower grade.
Okay, well, that is just first of all music to my ears.
Yeah, this is why I've been dying to talk to you, Sam.
Okay, because one of the problems teachers face is making sense of all the different points of view out there in the rest. And this is a really almost like teacher to teacher. Hey, folks, here's how to make sense of this. And here are some things to do. So that was just an amazing section of presentation. The next thing you wanted to talk about is everybody wants to know, okay, are you research-based? Do you have any reason to show that there's any science behind this at all, or is this all just personal opinion? What's going on here? So talk about that.
Yeah. So there was a lot of research, and I so agree with you, Sam. I think this is that art and science, that the idea of I
Okay,
wanted to.
I'll just give Tim Rosinski. That's Sam talking Tim Rosinski's ideas.
Yes. Okay. Yes. And I really.
Tim mad at me.
Yeah. Yeah. That quote that he said stays with me all the time, and the idea of teachers need simple tools, not because teaching is simple. It's because teaching is complex, and if their tools are too complicated, they can't focus on the kids. But they also need research-based tools. And so there was so much I read, but there were 3 bodies of research that I really honed in on that I want to talk about. And the first one is Guff and Tummer's simple view of reading. And sometimes that research, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what it is, but that research can be controversial. People will say it's not true, or it's. What I believe is that that's not the only thing. That's not the only research I look at in terms of teaching reading. And what that research says is that language conventions plus language comprehension equals reading comprehension. And the truth of the matter, what I take from that research is that some children, and in some situations, they need very deliberate, very systematic instruction. Like there are some kids who need, and in some situations, need to know they're going to get some instruction on the language conventions and not have to worry about the language comprehension in that moment. And I like the idea of thinking about giving that to the kids who need it. There's that equity. Not everyone needs it, but some kids need it that way. That's what's going to bring the joy of reading to them. And I actually use that simple view of reading. If you're looking, you're saying, wow, that sounds similar to the We Do model, because they talk about language conventions and I talk about language conventions, and same with the composition. I added the application strand because I feel it's super important from the start to be putting both together, because I think that creates the engagement. But I really relied on that research, the simple view of reading, and the idea of deliberate instruction, and giving kids access to deliberate instruction was really, really important and valuable. And earlier, Sam, you talked about the connection between reading and writing, and I actually really hope that by aligning it, or not, I shouldn't say aligning because it's not exactly the same. By using that research, it helps people move between reading and writing. I do think the We Do model helps with reading instruction as well, and there's so many connections between those two. So that was a huge one I looked at. The other body of research I looked at, and you're probably not surprised to hear this when you heard the word share, guide, and apply, is Pearson and Gallagher's research on the gradual release of responsibility. I was so insanely lucky. Dr. Pearson actually wrote a chapter, and I got to have conversations with him through the writing of the book. I know, kind of life-changing. But there were two things, I would say two things in particular that once people read my book, you'll see in terms of the gradual release. And one, and Dr. Pierce brought this up over and over again in our conversation, is the importance of seeing that gradual release as flexible. That the gradual, they never meant for the gradual release to be everyone sits and you have a model, and then everyone sits and has a share, everyone sits and has a guide. It's supposed to be responsive to what your kids need. One of the things that he said, and I so agree with this, is that he wishes that more people started the gradual release in the because watching kids first helps you know what they need. And so I hope that when people read my book, they see the idea of the gradual release flexibly, not as a one size fits all. The other thing that is a big idea in my book that we had a great chat over is the importance of lingering longer for some kids in that we do phase. One of my biggest, the tough conversation I had to have myself is that I realized that I was spending a lot of time modeling for kids, and doing lots and lots of modeling, and then lots of now go try this in your own writing. I wasn't spending enough time in that we do phase, that phase when it's low stake, we're doing it together. And what I found is that a lot of kids lingering longer in that gave them the confidence and the skill to be able to transfer, which is the whole point is, and I show in the book, follow some kids over time. So I see how lingering longer in the we do phase enabled kids who may not have been able to be independent before to be independent now. And yeah, so those were the two, the idea of being flexible and longer in the we do phase. And then body of research I looked at it was super simple research. I think it's anything a teacher would say, wow, that's, crazy. I can't believe it's true, but it's good to have research behind it. It was some research around the idea of something called the production effect. And the production effect basically says that if, or not kids, anybody, when you say things out loud, you tend to remember them and they tend to stick. And so that was the big research I leaned on with the idea of write aloud. That I try and do in write aloud is get every child's mouth to construct and practice the sentences out loud, not just the one child who comes up with it, but that we're collaboratively working together for all children to come up with it. In other words, they're practicing it out loud. And really honing in on that, I saw a major difference when all kids practiced it out loud. I did see that effect come to kids able to make that transfer. And that's what it's all about, is getting all kids to have equal access, becoming an independent writer.
Okay, well, as I listen to all this, once again, not just music to my ears, but also I'm thinking of all my readers out there who are practicing teachers. And so many times during that talk of yours, I was hearing about, and in the book, there are examples, and in the book, this is something you did with real kids over time, and all based on this foundational research. So that's about as good as it gets. Before you go on to your final thoughts, I'll just personally say I can't wait to get this book on my shelf. Okay, it's going to be a very useful tool. My third graders next year are going to, I push into several different grades, but my third graders next year are really going to thank you, because my gosh, I'm just already thinking, that's going to up my game. All right, I like this. So can't wait for this book to get out. So any final thoughts? And I'll leave myself with this final thought, that there will be a number of links and things like that. For those of you that follow the blog and do this through the blog, there'll be a number of links and things on the blog itself. And I know that you at the end here will share some ways that readers can get a hold of the book and get a hold of you and your website and all that kind of thing. So the end game here is all yours. Have at it.
Okay, one thought I hadn't thought until I was in the midst of this conversation I want to share is just the idea of, as I wrote this book, it really changed the way, and as I've been talking with teachers about scheduling writing instruction. If you had talked to me 20 years ago, I would have said my writing instruction is writing workshop. Writing workshop is certainly an important part of it, or a writing time, but I've been talking with teachers about how do we writing processes, interactive writing, phonics, write aloud, that all of those are also important parts of the writing instruction. The other thing I'm going to kind of go back to something I said in the beginning is I really hope we more and more people to kind of join the tough but trans conversations of a reading evolution and a writing evolution. I think we're at the perfect time for it. Where I have high hopes that we are about to enter, as Cornelius Minor says, a new and better normal. And I really think it's the perfect time to say, let me look at all sides of it, and let me have a. I hope my book can help with that. And then the other final thought is, I think the pandemic made this even more clear, is just the idea of honoring and taking care of our teachers. They deserve simple tools that let them be responsive to their kids. So hard, and when we honor teachers and give them the tools that they can then focus, which is what we want. So I would love people to get in touch with me on Twitter. So that's at Leah. I also have a We Do Writing Community Facebook page, so you can join me at the We Do page on Facebook. I also have an Instagram, We Do Writing, and you can always get a hold of me at my website, which is www.leahmermelstien.com.
Okay, well, and be sure to send the absent-minded professor here all that information so that it's in the blog for people that want to click in.
I will.
And this has been just fascinating, and my gosh, welcome to the radical middle, as P.W. Pearson, who
yes.
inventor of the gradual release of responsibility. P. David Pearson calls it the radical middle, that we're looking at things from all sides. Wow, that's really strong. So traditionally, I end these with a Zoom wave. So we're going to give ourselves a Zoom wave goodbye. Bye. Oh dear. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye. So much for having me.
Oh, thank
you. Bye, everyone.
The pleasure was mine, and that's all.